our Bigfoot Society. I've got the privilege of talking to Angelique Benham today. Angelique is with the group Legacy Discoveries in Search of the Truth. She's got many, many years of really researching into the forest people, correct?
Correct. Yep.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Angelique, you know, when I have the privilege of having a researcher on the show, I always like to know how they got their start, much like you had just asked me before we started rolling. What was it that first got you interested into doing this 20 plus years of research?
Well, my very first encounter is what got me interested in it. I actually come from a background of a family that didn't believe in Sasquatch. We were extremely skeptical. I grew up on the reservation, in the Colville Reservation in northeastern Washington, but I had grown up kind of believing that it was mostly a legend or something that happened many, many years ago, but it wasn't really anything that was in my wheelhouse, anything I expected to ever have happened to me. More or less, I believed that it might have been something that the elders did to kind of keep the kids from wandering too far from camp, you know. So I have to admit that in my naivety and in my youthful arrogance, I didn't really believe in Sasquatch. So it completely changed my life one day when I took my 3 sons and my sister-in-law and my 3 nephews, and we decided to go up to Sullivan Lake in the northeastern corner of Washington State. And when we were kayaking, I ended up having a extremely close encounter with a largemouth Sasquatch who was sitting on the bank of Sullivan Lake while I was kayaking very slowly past him. He looked so human that I didn't know I was looking at a Sasquatch. My entire frame of reference was always the Patterson-Gimlin film from the 1960s. And so I thought that if Bigfoot did exist, they all looked like Patty. I didn't know that not only do they exist, but they vary just like we do in their appearances from what could look like the Patterson-Gimlin film all the way to what I saw, which was a hairy man that was just a man with a lot of hair. I really didn't know that he was a Sasquatch. What caught my attention was that he was absolutely enormous, just a tank of a man, and very, very tall, and actually he was very good looking. He wasn't scary in any way, shape, or form. He was very attractive. But when I was kayaking past him, I had left my vest, my life vest, with one of my kids, and so I didn't have a life vest, and so I was staying right up against the shore while I was kayaking so that if I rolled my boat, I could be right there offshore and I wouldn't have to worry about anything being caught too far out, you know, without a life vest. So I was very close to him. I was probably only about 8 feet away. And I have since gone back to that area and gone to where that stump was. And 8 feet might even be counting it a little bit far. So I was very close to him. He was sitting on a log. And as I was passing him, I looked over at him and waved. And I thought that he was a man. When he stood up, though, I did get a good look at him at one point where I realized that this man, whom I first thought was an elder man wearing turtleneck and long sleeves in 90-degree weather, and thinking, well, that's a little odd, but you know, some people do that. When I passed in front of him, I was able to realize that he was actually covered in hair and he was naked. And then I was embarrassed. I didn't want to look at him because I was embarrassed because I realized then that he was nude. And I also didn't want to offend him because his face was so intelligent, human, and he had a very proud kind of almost I want to say regal look about him. He had very excellent posture. He actually had one leg crossed over the other, was holding onto his knee. So at very, very good posture, and just held his chin up really high and proud. And he had just these beautiful eyes that were just stunning. I mean, I've never seen a set of contacts. I've never seen anything that even resembled the eye color that he had. So I was caught off guard by the way that this man looked. And then when I realized as I was passing him that it was hair and not clothes, then I was almost ashamed of myself because I was gawking at him and I didn't want him to feel embarrassed, you know, that I was staring at him. So I looked away, but I looked over my shoulder. And when I looked over my shoulder, he had stood up and he had reached up with his arm and had pulled a branch out of his face. And this man was absolutely enormous. He wasn't just tall, he was probably 4 feet across the shoulder, and his biceps were just enormous, and I could literally see his muscles ripple when he moved his arm, and then he lifted his foot up and I could see the muscles on his thigh just ripple. And I remember thinking, judging from the looks of him, that he was probably 2 feet taller than my dad, and my dad was 6'6". So he was a very, very, very big man. And I was more wondering about this man with all this body hair. And I felt really embarrassed because I didn't want him to feel like I was judging him for his hair, the body hair.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked away, and when I looked back the last time, he was gone. Now, Sullivan Lake is an enormous lake, and so when I got about halfway across or halfway down the lake, I met up with my family because they were all ahead of me. When I met up with them, my sister-in-law went, "Oh, look, there's a hunter up there." And I looked up on the top of the mountain, and for those of you that want to Google it, it's called Hall Mountain. And Hall Mountain has a bald spot across. It's a meadow that faces the lake. And when I looked up there to the top of Hall Mountain, there was that man, and he was walking parallel with me. And as I was clear down on the lake and he was up there, we could still see him, and he was staying with me. And he did that all the way until we got to the other side of the mountain and to the far side of the lake, and he disappeared into the trees. But he followed me that whole day. And I still, it didn't sit well with me that this man was so big and so hairy, but I didn't think of him as a Sasquatch. I thought of him as this big hairy nudist who for some reason was walking and not concerned about the terrain, because Hall Mountain is really steep and rocky, and was just following. It was one of those things that it was like it didn't sit well with me, but I still didn't want to think Sasquatch, because it just wasn't, he didn't look like the Patterson Gimlin film. He looked like a man. He looked like a tall man. So after I saw him, it started bugging me, and I ended up getting on a website. Now, this is back in the year 2000. I got on a website, and I was looking for anybody that could give me answers to what I was trying to find out about this disease, because I thought he must have a genetic disorder with the hair, and I wanted to learn about that. And I was in college, and I had just gotten my first computer, and I was trying to do some research, but you really couldn't find much in the year 2000. It really wasn't a really, really good research back then. But I did find a chat room that had a forum where you could fill out any kind of an anomaly. It could have been little people, it could have been ghosts, it could have been, aliens. You posted it in this chat room full of your peers, and then they would kind of give you their best answers. And I did that, but people were giving me answers that I wasn't looking for. They were saying, "Oh, you probably saw a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot," and I'm going, "No, I just saw a big hairy man. What's this disease? What's this disorder? And they weren't giving me the answer that I wanted. So I kind of gave up, and I shut the computer down. Now, back then, I didn't worry too much about hackers. It was still kind of becoming a new thing 25 years ago. So if they asked me for my phone number, I probably gave it. I probably gave out a bunch of information to get on this website. And it wasn't long after that I got a phone call from a gentleman who, excuse me, it came up on a caller ID box. I had a caller ID box attached to my landline, and it said U.S. government on it. Well, I have a brother. Yeah, I have a brother who works in the U.S. government, and he retired from the U.S. government. And so when I saw U.S. government, I thought something bad had happened to my brother. So I picked up, and I'm waiting to hear something horrible, that my brother had passed away or something bad, And this gentleman, asked me, "Is this Angelique?" And yes, this is me. And then he introduced himself to me and said he worked for some department. He gave me his name, told me the department, but I wasn't paying attention because I was expecting the worst of the worst. But he said, "I want to talk to you about the Sasquatch you saw at Sullivan Lake." And I went, "Oh, no, what? I didn't see a Sasquatch. I just saw a big hairy man." And it still wasn't connecting, because I was still waiting for him. Why would the U.S. government be calling me? And I was still waiting for him to tell me something about my brother. Well, when I said that, then I don't know if I irritated him, or I don't know if he was laughing, but I could hear him on the other end just kind of go, "I want to talk to you about the Sasquatch that you saw at Lake." Well, to be honest with you, at the moment, it instantly completely freaked me out. I didn't have, it caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. And I don't know why, but my gut just hang up. Talk to this guy. Don't give him information. Do not talk. And all I said to him was, I said, I didn't see a Sasquatch. All I saw was a big hairy man, and I hung up. Now, 25 years later, I wish I had heard what he had to say.
Yeah.
I really wish I had found out what this guy wanted to talk to me about, because it probably would have been really interesting. I don't know if he was he sounded like he was being official. Whether or not that was just his persona and he just happened to be calling me on his lunch break, I don't know. But now I would like to know what it was he wanted to talk to me about. But I didn't, and I hung up. And he did try calling me back, and I saw U.S. government, and I didn't pick up. So that, to me, was like, okay, what the heck? Did I? You know, and so I talked to my kids about it, because they were from, you know, freshmen in high school on down to, you know, middle school. And I had asked my kids, I said, did you see the guy? And they said, yeah, we saw a hunter walking up on the hill. And I'm like, okay, well, and then I told them about the phone call and stuff. Well, my oldest son told me, he goes, you know, Mom, he said, there's this new website that the guys at school are talking about. You might want to tell your story on it and see if they can help you. And of course, that was the BFRO. And I went ahead and I said, okay. And I found it, and I filled out the little template. And for those of you that go back and watch it and look at it, the date on it was actually wrong. I think it's in the website, it's 2002, but it really happened to me the year 2000, because it happened right after my brother died. My brother died May 2000. So there's just that glitch. But anyway, whenever you fill out something, especially a Class A sighting, the BFRO will send somebody to talk to you and interview you. Well, I got interviewed by a man, and we ended up talking for, like, I'm not kidding, we had to have talked at least 2 to 3 hours, if not more. And we ended up turning out to be really good friends. And that man is Mel Scahan. And Mel
Sure.
Scahan. Yeah, so for those who know who Mel is, Mel was featured on Flash of Beauty and I think several documentaries and stuff. Fantastic individual. Him and his wife, Christine, are really good friends of mine. But Mel ended up being kind of my mentor for a long time. And when he talked to me and we really discussed everything that I saw, then he basically solidified it for me and said, okay, yeah, you did see one of the forest people. They don't all look like the Patterson-Gimlin film. So, you know, for those who say, well, they only have long arms or they only have no neck and stuff, well, they vary just like we do in color and size and eye color, in, you know, everything. And so just like we do. And that was my very, very, very first encounter that I know of. I do believe now, from all the research that we've done and for the many encounters that we have had, I believe there may have been more that I just was unaware of. But that was the first one that I visually came in very close contact with and could describe exactly what he looked like. And yeah, so that was my very first one. That's what started it for me.
That's absolutely incredible encounter. I know that you also have been interviewed by Sibylla Irwin. correct?
Yes.
And she has
Yes.
a really cool um, artist's rendering of what she drew, what you described. And it is just very cool. I'm going to probably put that in the description of this episode so people can check that out as well. But a question I had about what you saw that day, because you mentioned that the eyes were very, they really drew you in. Were they eyes where you could see whites around the pupils, or
Yes.
were they all one color?
Yeah, no, they were just like our eyes. You could see the whites. You could see, actually, I was close enough to him that I could literally see his eye color, and I could see his eyelashes around his eyes. He had really just and I can't like just pick out a color and go, they were brown or they were orange. They were just an absolutely beautiful golden brown that was really light, a light colored golden brown that was somewhat hazel almost, but more on a yellow brown look. Beautiful. I mean, absolutely the most beautiful color I'd ever seen. And trust me, 25 years I've looked and I've looked for any kind of, you know, any kind of, like maybe oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank right now? Contacts or anything to put in
Gotcha.
your eye to come up with that color. I've never seen anything even close. Sibylla did a fantastic job of being able to get as close as anybody's been able to. Now, even the photo, as much as she did, it still isn't the real thing. But I've even had people try to use AI to try to get close to what he looked like, and not even similar. Sibylla did a fantastic job. Not only that, but she was able to bring in the map and show the mountain and the diagrams to show where we were at, photos of the beach and stuff. She did a fantastic job. So, and she's not just that, but she's just a wonderful person. She's just a good person too, and I really like her.
She really seems like that she definitely is. I also
Yeah.
enjoy watching her interviews, and hopefully someday I'll be able to talk to her. We'll see. But the hair that you saw as well on it, did you notice that it was a certain color, or was there a certain length to it?
Well, what it was, from a distance, it looked like he had silver gray hair from a distance, and it was short, kind of trim, and from a distance, I thought he was a grandpa. I thought he was an elder, because I had seen him from probably 100 yards away when I first saw him, and he was walking down the embankment, following two little boys, and the little boys were like our little boys. They were wearing little shorts and stuff. So I don't know to this day if those little boys had actually seen him, or whether or not he was, maybe behind them. They weren't paying attention, but he looked like an elder that had silver hair and was watching and protecting these little boys while they were playing at the water's edge. Now, when I got up close, the two little boys took off up the hill, and he stayed there by the bank and let me go right past him. When I got up close to him, that was one of the things that kind of caught me off guard, was that he wasn't as old as I thought he was. I was expecting an old man, and he wasn't, maybe in his early 40s. He had salt and pepper hair, and the dark part of his hair was maybe a little bit reddish, a little bit of, well, if you know horses, kind of a sorrow color,
Okay.
but mostly salt and pepper. So, but when I got up close to him, it was almost like it was more of a reflection of the sun, was the silver color. When I got up close to him, it didn't look as dark as it did from it didn't look as white as it did from a distance. It looked darker. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Okay.
You had seen the individual also walk, um, you've mentioned. And did it have a particular gait to the way it walked or anything out of the ordinary?
No, no, he is smooth, just smooth and graceful. And when he walked down the hill towards the water with the little boys in front of him, he just watched the little boys and then sat down. When he was up on the hill, what I noticed was that he was, well, he was walking what looked like a casual pace, very casual, very just a normal, I'm out for a walk, but was keeping up with me. And he was clear up on the mountain and I was clear down here. So he had to have been really covering a lot of ground quickly, but he didn't look like he was doing much more than just out for a Sunday stroll. I did notice that he would look down at his feet and then he would look over at me and then he would look down at his feet and then he would look over. So it was like he was watching where he was walking and then he would look down to where I was down at the water. And he just, it would be like what anybody else would do. There really was nothing about it that looked supernatural other than I know that he had to have really been covering a lot of ground, but doing it in what looked like just a casual, normal gait.
Gotcha. Has anyone else reported seeing any other individual that looks like the one that you saw in the same area?
I don't think so, not to my knowledge. I do know that Sullivan Lake has had more reports of things like tree knocks and whoops and sounds and stuff up in that area, but I don't know if anybody's actually seen him. I do know that I've recently gone back. I went with one of my teammates, Tanya, and her and I went back this summer, and we walked out to where it had all happened, and we had found some structures and some things like that we were able to kind of go, okay, they're still here. They are absolutely still there. And I have met a couple of my friends that have said that they've had a couple footfalls in the dark around their tent and stuff. So there's still some activity going on over there, but I don't
Okay.
know if it's him. It could be any of the clan. Could be any of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just curious, this area of Washington has come up a few times in the last month, and actually, I just did an interview very recently with two gentlemen. Are you familiar with the area called Gypsy Meadows?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Is that any place that you have had interactions or things occur in?
I haven't, because I moved out of the Colville National Forest not too long after this incident had happened, and I moved over to North Idaho.
Mm.
I didn't have any, like I said earlier, that I know of. I could have had encounters and just didn't know it, because they're pretty good at coming up real close to you without you realizing that they're there. I do know that Gypsy Meadows has a lot of, we've had a lot of reports that came out of Gypsy Meadows, but mostly that's, I think Will Ulmer has more of that area. He's a researcher out of the Stevens County, that whole Colville National Forest area. So that's kind of his territory. We work more over in North Idaho now.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I've actually was just reaching out to Will earlier today to see if we could have a conversation about that area. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool that you have that connection as well. So after you had this experience, how did it affect you in the days after? Sometimes, or for example, sometimes people will have strange things happen, or they'll get really into the subject, or sometimes it'll just lay dormant for a few years and then they'll get into it longer, or they'll get into it later in life.
It didn't. I thought that was an only encounter ever happened, and so I was just really cool that experience, but never happen again. So I just kind of went, that was cool. Kind of moved on with my life. It wasn't very long until after, I would say probably about 2 years after that, then my kids and I started having more encounters where I had one of them come up in the yard one time when my kids were there. They were older teenagers at that time, had a pizza party, and we lived out in the Colville National Forest. And my middle son opened up the door to let my dog out, and there was one standing right off the porch. And he pulled the dog back in, shut the door, because he was kind of going, what did I just see? Opened the door again, and it was still standing there. And then he said it tried to shoo at him, like, get away, get away. And he said he enormous. This is a deck, so it was up high on the deck, and it was eye level to him. And at that time, he was probably 5'8", 5'9" at the time. And then he called my oldest son, who was at that time, in high school, to come look. And then he opened the door, and he said all he saw was it turned and looked at him and then turned around. And he said, Mom, it was this enormous, big, hairy dude. And he was just running up the road and disappeared in the trees over there. So the next day, of course, that was at night, the next day we went out and we found the tracks. They weren't castable tracks, but they were impressions in the bank where it had jumped up the bank, and we saw that it was headed up the mountain. So, and we lived out, by Forest Service land, so we didn't have neighbors. It was right off the yard, went straight up into the Selkirks. So he just ran right out of the yard and went right up the hill, and they saw that one. I didn't see him. They saw that one.
Okay, gotcha. And that was in the Colville Reservation?
The Colville National Forest.
Oh,
yeah,
Colville.
So it was
Yeah,
outside of Colville. Yeah. Yep. Kind of in Will's territory.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. So was that a thing where when you were in that area, you were experiencing just that one interaction, or did stuff happen off and on for multiple years when you were in that forest area?
Well, that was when things started to happen, where it was, it would be when you would least expect it, just like driving down the road or something out in the woods. And then you would just catch a glimpse of, somebody walking that you'd take a double take, and it would be like, okay, that's not natural. That's not natural. And then it would just be gone. And it would always be when you least expected it. Usually when I had somebody with me who also witnessed it. So it wasn't like, at that point in time, I was trying to be very, very, very still skeptical and say, okay, is this my imagination, or am I just, what caused that? And then it would be the other person with me who would also be going, yeah, I saw that. I saw it too. I was with this lady by the name of Donna, who was with the BFRO, and her and I started researching together. And it was more just for fun. I never expected to find anything, but on our very first outing, we went up to Little Twin Lakes, which is a part of where Will does a lot of his investigation. And we found in January, in a big snowy ground. No, please excuse me. It wasn't January. There was still snow on the ground, but it was starting to melt. There was mud. So it would have been, let's see, in Colville area, probably been February, probably the middle part of February. We found a mud bog, and coming out of just these bushes that were so thick and so thorny, nobody in their right mind would ever want to ever crawl in there. Coming out of those bushes were perfect sets of human looking bare feet going right into the water. And so, you know, it was her and I both tried to cast that, but it was the very first cast I had ever done. We picked up every stick and every pebble, and I mean, we didn't know how to cast it correctly, and it was just a big glob is all it was. But I think Donna still has that casting, but I'm not sure. So, you know, little things were happening in the Colville area, but it was after we moved to North Idaho that I had some property out by Priest River, and it was I had 77 acres, and it was lakefront property, but it was a private lake where it was literally just my place. So nobody else lived on that lake. I had 3 sides of that lake was Forest Service, or 3 sides of the property was Forest Service. So I had no close neighbors, and it was wilderness. I mean, and in North Idaho, you have grizzlies, you have moose, you have elk, you have everything. And it was on that property that we started going, wait a second, you know, we're hearing noises in the middle of the night that we can't explain. We've all lived in the forest our whole lives. We know what elk sound like. We know what, you know, everything. If you lived in the inland Northwest, you know what these animals sound like. And we couldn't figure out what it was. And I ended up asking Mel, and Mel came up to visit and brought a recorder and was able to go out on my property about 3 o'clock in the morning. He came out and did a bunch of calls and was able to get responses and recorded. That was just, it was so, from that point of time, it just escalated. I started meeting people who had encounters. Those people started putting me in contact with other people who had encounters. And it started turning into this collection of people they would see me and go, hey, I heard you had something going on, you know, well, this happened to me in that same area, you know, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and all these people. And it just escalated to the point that we kind of went, my goodness, you know, this is a hot spot. This is a huge hot spot. So I did a little bit of research, and the area that was the Hoodoo Valley. So the Hoodoo Valley.
I was curious. Yep.
Yeah, the Hoodoo Valley in North Idaho has been known for many, many, many generations for there being just things happening that are supernatural, paranormal, all over. Not just Bigfoot. There's also people that have had encounters with dogmen. There's been these white things. I don't even know what they are, but they're tall and bald, and they kind of look almost like a Sasquatch, but they're hairless and they look really, really scary. There's been encounters with people saying that there's aliens, all kinds of stuff in Hoodoo Valley. Hoodoo Valley connected to Hoodoo Mountain, Hoodoo Mountain. And so this whole area is all connected to the Selkirks. So the Selkirks start out at the base of the Spokane Valley, right at the edge of the Palouse, and they go all the way up where they meet into Canada. And then you can either go east and go right into the Cabinet Mountain Range and go right into Montana, or you go west and end up over in the, up over the Cascades and then up over into Canada. So, I mean, basically, once you hit this area, you go all the way up into Canada and it just doesn't stop. And there's places that you can get from Spokane Valley up into Canada and never cross a road. I mean, it's wilderness. So, anything could be up in here, but it's not just, that we've experienced this stuff coming at us and hearing things and talking to people. It's that after a while, it got to the point where we started having interactions with them.
I was going to ask you next, when did that start? Because
yeah,
I can absolutely tell that it did happen at one point. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, so what started for me was about 4 years ago. I was just freshly divorced and I bought a brand new Jeep, and I was out cruising the back login roads, just playing around. And this tree, I come around this really, really narrow dirt road, was literally just idling because it was just a dirt road. And there was a fresh fallen pine tree that the road was getting ready to go right around this pine tree. And as I was coming around the corner, I saw a flash of black at the end of the pine tree. And I knew it was like the biggest bear I had ever seen. And I mean, I've been up in the woods so much, and I've camped and worked in logging and reforestation and stuff. So bears are that's a part of life. It's just a part of life. But this was like the biggest bear I have ever seen in my life. And when I stepped on the brakes, I was sitting there idling, and this bear didn't leave. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, because usually the sound of a vehicle, the bears are out of there. They're gone if they hear a vehicle. And I'm sitting there, and I'm about, I don't know, maybe I would say probably 40 feet from it. And it started rocking back and forth like this. And I went, okay, wait a second. That's not what bears don't rock back and forth like that. And so I sat and really looked at what I was looking at. And then I realized what I was seeing was a woman, a hairy woman, squatted down, like on her haunches, with her feet tucked up underneath her. She had her hands on both sides of her eyes like this. And I could see her down her shoulder. I could see the side of her breast. I could see all her hip, down her legs and her feet. And she was sitting and rocking back and forth. And I went, okay, I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm looking at now. And by then I had enough encounters, spotty encounters, that I had talked to Mel. I had been working with a mentor from the Lakota tribe who had been helping me, telling me what to do, and so I knew at that point in time that I needed to talk to her. Mm-hmm. So I rolled down my window and I stuck my head out and I said, I see you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to cause you any problems. I'm not going to take your picture, but I have to go that way with my vehicle. So I'm going to come on ahead of you, and I just want you to know I'm not here to hurt you. And it was like after I said that, because at first, I've got my hand on the gear shift. I'm like, do I pop it in reverse? I mean, I don't know if I need to get out of here. I got to be ready. But it was like I kind of got this feeling like, it's okay, go ahead. So okay, and I just popped it in first, and I just let myself just slowly kind of idle forward. And as I got towards her, I started noticing that at her feet, that black color that she was, started almost like a vibration. It was like it wasn't almost, it was vibrating like a shimmery kind of thing, almost like oh goodness, like when you see a heat wave come across the highway.
Yep.
It vibrating, and vibrating, that black started disappearing. Invisible turned into like, it looked like a bush, like a quaky ash. That rosemary green leaves you see in Alaska, quakies. It's a leaf that kind of moves a lot, and it flips from like lighter color green to a darker green, shiny. And I watched her just kind of, I guess, chameleon into like this green quaky bush. And I went,
Oh, wow.
okay, so I just saw her go into something I'd never even thought of before. And went, okay, that's weird, but I'm gonna just keep on forward. And as I was passing the tree, I was looking over, and I still couldn't see her. I could see the pine boughs and the needles and stuff off the pine tree, and what looked like the quaky bush at the far end. But halfway down the tree, this little head popped up, and I was eye level with a little gray, kind of gray skinned, ash skinned little boy. And I was literally looking into this face of a child that looked like he was maybe 2 years old, like a toddler. He had a little bit of hair, but not a lot. He wasn't like covered in hair. He had like, I guess pork chops is what you'd call it, the kind of the whiskers down here, but the rest of his face didn't have any hair. And he was actually kind of a cute little guy, but he looked over at her at the end of the tree, and he looks at me, and he kind of got a look on his face like, uh-oh, and he ducked back down behind the tree again and vanished behind the tree. And here I am just coasting by going, did I just see that? And I looked over, and that was when I saw another one standing up against the back. She was standing underneath a tree, had her back against a tree, and it was a young woman who looked like maybe 15, 16 years old, but she was very pretty. She looked very like an Australian Aborigine. She had very dark skin, very like full lips. She actually was very pretty, and just built like Olympic runner. Like you could see her six pack, and you could tell that she was nude, but it was like you couldn't really see anything. It was all kind of covered in dark hair. but you could still see the muscle structure on her. She was ripped. But she was proportionately ripped, like athletic Olympic athlete is what she looked like.
Sure.
When I went past, I looked back and I couldn't see any of them again. But I got down the road a little ways and I reached a dead end. I had to turn around and come back. And when I had to turn around and come back, I couldn't see any of them again. Now I went and I took one of my teammates. At the time, I was in Sasquatch Sisters Northwest, and I was with Cindy Goodbreak.
Oh yeah.
And I took her with me, and because she wanted to see that. So I went back the next day and I took Cindy with me. And when we got there, that quaky bush there was no quaky bush. It was just the pine tree. There was no bushes around it. It was just a pine tree. So that was something that literally happened from the woman. We got out, we found all around it was bald spots on the ground behind the tree where they had been sitting and had worn the grass completely bare. And there were bones all over, stacks of little piles of bones of different various bones. Like you'd find a hip bone with a vertebrae and maybe a femur or something, but you wouldn't find the whole carcass. You would just find pieces. So it was almost like they gathered there to have dinner, you know?
Right.
And that was just the beginning of when we started realizing that that's what they do. So I started doing my own kind of research when it came to going and looking for fallen trees and stuff. And we found, I can't tell you how many trees that had bones and bare spots behind it, where they use it like a blind. They sit behind it and they watch human activity. So, I always encourage people that if you're in an area where there's forest and there's, say, homes or, some populated area, look for that one fallen tree. Look for that one tree that parallels, and then go behind it, and you'll find the bare spots where they sit there and they watch, because it's a perfect blind. You don't see them. They can see out, but you don't see them.
That is such a cool experience. It's actually something I was gonna ask you, because and I'll just tell the story really quick. I had a kind of similar experience like that out in Oak Ridge in 2024, down by the reservoir. And I remember I was driving. Okay. So there's this guy I know. His name is Bill from out in Oregon. And he's like, when you're ready to see one, all you have to do is just say in your mind, I'm ready to see one. And it was the last day before I left to go back to Iowa. I was driving down this road by the reservoir, and I was like, you know what? In my mind, I was like, you know what? I'm ready to see one. Literally, I drive by this pine tree that's covered with ivy, and I see the silhouette of what looks like a 7-foot Sasquatch. And then a half a second later, it disappears into the ivy. And I was like, I don't know what just happened. And the crazy thing is that this last year, or July of 2025, I go back to the same area. I can't find the pine tree.
Really?
I can't find it. Yeah.
The whole pine tree?
I can't find it. And I'm like, so I don't know what happened that day, but I heard your account just then. I was like, man, what a cool thing. Sounds a little bit familiar. So yeah, cool stuff.
Well, I did. I got a hold of Mel Scahan again, and I told him what happened, and all he did was he just goes, "Congratulations, you saw one cloak finally." And I was like,
wow.
"That's cloaking," and because he was like, he was almost applauding me. So he was like, congratulations. Yeah, so that was the beginning of me meeting her and her kids. Okay. Now, where that took place, it was literally as the crow flies, right about a half a mile from where I used to live on the ranch. Now, I had to leave that ranch when I married my ex-husband, and I lost it all, of course, because I
Mhm.
left it all to be with him, and now I'm divorced. So I lost my property, but I
Right.
still go back there all the time because there's a Forest Service, around that whole area. So I go up to the Forest Service and I spend time up in there. Being with her, now this was the very beginning of when I met Dr. Igor Burtsev from Russia.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And yeah, and he started working with me on learning how to do mind speak. Then I had Tanya Braddock, who is part of our team, and she has Existential Empath podcast. And so she teaches how to mind speak and how to be empathic and intuitive to your surroundings to know when something's going on. So Tanya and I have literally been partners in going out and researching since then. So it's been about 4 years of almost every single weekend, sometimes a couple times a week, going out into the woods and tracking, finding structures, and then going into these areas and asking to communicate. And what you said about what he told you about asking to see one, that's a huge thing, because what we found to be extremely successful is that you have to think of these people as basically they are they're more civilized than what you realize, though.
Mhm.
Uncivilized tribe that you would meet in, say, the rainforest of Brazil.
Right.
Okay. You come across this tribe, and you have to think of it interculturally. What's the first thing that you do? You show respect. You do not assume that because they're human shaped and look like you, that they're going to just automatically think and have the same morals, the same mores, the same rules that we do. They're not. You have to go into it, put your ego aside, and go into it with a humble attitude to learn from them and be kind when you do it and respectful. What we do is we enter in when we see a structure, which is it's so simple. You don't have to go out in the middle of the night. You don't have to go up in the middle of nowhere and hike in 20 miles. You don't have to do that. You literally go where you find evidence and you just go back to that area. And then you state your intention, introduce yourself, because if you're meeting somebody for the first time, what's the first thing you do? You introduce yourself,
Mhm.
introduce the people that are around you. You ask to have a friendly encounter with them. State your intention. Your intention is that you want to learn from them, and you would like to be able to take the information that they're going to give you back to our people and teach our people. Then you show
Wow.
respect by being 100% honest. You tell them, I'm only here for the day, if you're here for the day. I might be back, but I might not. You tell them when you're leaving, and if you're going to come back, be sure to tell them that you're going to come back. Do not ever, ever, ever tell them that you're not going to come back and then change your mind later and come back, because to them, that's a lie. You just gave them a falsehood. You told me you weren't coming back, but you're here now. Now we can't trust you. Trust is 100% with them, and truth is 100%. And when I go out in the woods, I was even taught, do not go out in the woods and wear makeup. If you're a woman, don't go out wearing makeup. This is fake. If you're wearing makeup, that's not you. And they don't like that. They want truth. They want you to tell them what you're there for, who are you, and, you know, basically state why you're here. And then if they so choose to communicate with you, make sure you give an offering, but don't do candy. Don't do things that processed foods. They make us sick. They make them sick. Don't give them candy. Don't introduce tooth decay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got apples, you can bring them something natural like apples. If you can give them nuts, they love nuts. Don't do peanut butter though. They love peanut butter. Don't get me wrong, but peanut butter isn't good for them anymore. There's a lot of additives and stuff. So what we do is we gift tobacco, and we use natural tobacco. We get American Spirit because it's loose and it's natural. And then we bring it out to them because for generations, tobacco has always been utilized by the native tribes as an offering of friendship and honor. Even today, when you're at a powwow, when you're meeting elders, you always bring tobacco. So it's a high honor to bring tobacco. So we give them tobacco and we state, this is an offering for you for a token of our friendship. After you've introduced yourself, then you let them know that tobacco is for them. And you don't put it on the ground. They're not dogs. They're not animals. They're not going to lap it up off the ground. You put it on a stump or you put it on a rock, but you don't put it directly on the ground. That's disrespectful. So everything that you do with respect. And then on your way out, you thank them for the time that they allowed you to be there. You thanked them if they gave you noises, hoots, hollers, whatever. You thank them for that. Tell them that it made you happy and that you want to come back again and be with them again. And each time you go back, it gets better and better. And I will tell you that some of the most beautiful experiences I have ever experienced in my life have been with the forest people who have allowed me to come in and see their children, be with them, listen to them laugh and giggle and play practical jokes. We've had just some funny things. They have a great sense of humor. We've had some funny things happen where they've liked to sneak up on us and then bark really loud to make you jump and squeal, and then they laugh. And so, I mean, it's just like being around the children. The children are the ones, it's just like being around your own kids. It's exactly the same way. The parents are more stoic. They're very protective of their children. And if they feel that you're endangering one of them, they will scare you away. So these, where people are thinking that they're coming in contact with a demon, well, they can be pretty scary, yeah, but they're not demons. They're just getting you away from their baby, and anything any parent would do. So it's miraculous to watch and see and witness and have other people with me while this happens and witness it and see it and go, oh my goodness. And yet people still will go, you're crazy. You're insane. It's all a hoax, and I think anybody that has experienced it is going to say the same thing, that most of this you can't talk about. I have family members I can't talk to this about. I have friends I can't talk to this about. I've lost friends, family members, lost a job
Oh,
because,
wow, really?
you know, people just
Mm.
go, you're a quack, and it's not it. We've had so many people who were witnesses to it all, and we've all experienced it, just going, oh my goodness, and yet none of us can talk outside of this community, and it's really frustrating.
So when you are doing that, where you're, stating your intention and asking different things, are you doing that verbally then, or is it in your mind? Because I've heard both.
Well, actually, we do both.
Okay.
We did learn how to do mind speak. Tanya's actually just absolutely adept at it. She's amazing at it. But what I do is usually out loud, speak out loud. Um, Tanya can do it all through MindSpeak. I have learned how to do MindSpeak and have had some pretty amazing things that have happened through it that have been validated by other people. So it is a legitimate thing, and it is a legitimate science that, like even Dr. Burtsev had told us that they've been doing this for many, many years in the US government, experimenting with mind speak or telepathy.
Oh, sure.
Um, so it is something that's legitimate, but not all people have the ability. And like myself, I have it only when I least expect it. So it'll happen, and then I can try and try and try and nothing for months, and then all of a sudden I'll just be walking in the forest and boom, I'll get something like, who are you and what are you here for? Yeah, oh,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself, so something like that. But there was that. I wanted to share with you something that happened over in Oregon. You said that you were over in the Willamette National
Yeah.
Forest.
Yep. Over in
Um,
the Cascade region. Yep.
yeah, so I was up in the West Cascades with a friend of mine, and I have to tell you this. Do we have enough time, or do you
Yeah.
need to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I had to take my friend and my friend Carlos. So Carlos, I can't pronounce his last name. Abascal,
Oh,
Abascal,
yeah. Yep.
yeah. Okay, so Carlos traveled the world recently looking for Sasquatch. And when he got back, and actually he found some amazing things, and he did find in the majority of the countries that he was in evidence of it. But I'm going to let him share that with you, because
Hmm.
he's a world traveler on that. But when he got back, we wanted to spend a weekend and go up into the West Cascades as just kind of an excursion. I was living down in Roseburg, Oregon at the time, and he's living in Bend. And we decided to kind of meet, and go over to the ocean and then make our way back. Well, as we were coming up a mountain just on a Forest Service road, is all it was, we found this enormous structure. And when you go up into that area, you don't find a lot of snow load. There isn't a lot of snow down in that area. It's more
Hmm.
rainforest. So it's not, you don't find as many structures per se, snow load, windfall, that kind of thing, as you do over here. Whereas over there, when you find something, you can pretty much get out and walk around it and look to see if there's holes in the ground or a stump, or if it was done by logging equipment. And if it's legit, and that you've ruled out all those different things from, you know, anything from, even just a landslide or whatever, But if you're able to rule out all of those things and you see that it's a big structure, you know that they're in the area. Now, one thing really interesting about that area is that the game trails are so easy to spot and easy to follow. And the footprints that we found were enormous. And we had probably 8 different individuals that we were able to track going up and down this mountainside. Well, we found this one structure, and we had come up with a decision that we were going to try something different with our research, is that we were going to try and camp at the base of one of the structures. Now, I don't recommend doing that. That was a huge mistake. So please, for any of your listeners, do not do that. That's a disrespect, and we didn't realize it. Okay. We have since learned, but we did decide that we were going to camp there. Now, it was right off the road, and it was, just a Forest Service gravel road. It was right off the road. So the road's up here, and we hiked down about 25 yards down to the only flat spot we could find. And we decided to just set up our chairs. We didn't even put up a tent. So we parked our 2 vehicles face nose to nose. I have my Jeep. He has a Tahoe where he's got one of those rooftop tents.
Yep. So
he's set to go at any given time. And I'm set to go because I've got a Rubicon, so I can lay my seats down and sleep in the back. And so we hiked down the trail, we set up our chairs, and we decided that what we were going to do was we were going to invite them to us. Instead of going and trying to look for them, we were just going to say, hey, we invite you to come join us at our camp. And we decided we were just going to sit there and laugh and joke and talk and just be ourselves and not do anything like make any calls or knocks on trees or do anything. We were just going to be 2 people hanging out in the woods. And we were sitting there, and right about the time that it got dark, off through the trees, we started hearing now, for anybody that's been in that kind of the forest, and I know that you have, you've got those huge, like, just almost like, they almost look like palm fronds. They're just everywhere, the thick foliage. And it was somewhat of a dry year last year, so it was like walking on cornflakes. You could hear just crunching. And excuse me. So we're sitting there, and I told Carlos, I said, did you hear that? Did you hear the footsteps? And he goes, yep, I heard it. And I said, okay, let's just keep right on talking and see if they're going to come up to us. And we heard, and it was bipedal, absolutely bipedal. And it was just coming closer and closer, coming at us, coming up towards us through the brush, going. Well, it gets to right about, I would say probably about 25, 30 yards from us. And I stood up and I decided that I was going to greet them. And we had also decided that we were going to speak to them in old languages. We weren't going to talk to them in English because English is a new language. We wanted to talk to them in old languages and see if that's something that would resonate with them better. So I told, Carlos, I said, Carlos, you talk to them in Spanish. I'm going to talk to them in Lakota. And so, okay, we made this deal. And as it was getting closer, I stood up and I introduced myself in Lakota and greeted the person in Lakota. And Carlos hadn't even gotten the chance to even state who he was. And that stopped, turned and went crash, 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 and ran directly at us. And it's dark. I can't see anything. It's coming at me, and I'm literally, we can feel the ground shake like an elephant is coming at us. And I turned to Carlos and I went, Carlos, it's time for us to go. And Carlos goes, yep. And we stood up, and I was like, I turned around and I headed up the hill, and I just said, we're really sorry. We're sorry. We should not have been down here. We were down here too close to your structure. It was disrespectful. I am so sorry. We're going to go up on the road where we belong, where our people go. We're going to go back up on the road. And Carlos is saying, yep, we're sorry. We're going up on the road now. And we literally, okay, anybody that's ever been bluff charged by a bear or had anything coming at you, you know that if you're in its territory, you need to get out. You need to leave. You need to get in your car and go away, okay? We didn't. We just went up to the road because that's where we told them where we were going to go. And we set our chairs down right between the two vehicles, and we literally sat in the dark at the top of that trail that we had just come up, where about 25 yards down, that being bluff charged us. So we didn't leave. We stayed there, but we stayed between the two vehicles, and we sat there and we could hear it pace back and forth, but it never came up. Okay. So I'm sitting there, Carlos sits in his chair, we're talking about it, and everything goes silent down there. So we're like, okay, it's fine with us being up here. We don't have to leave. We're going to stay here. We're still going to stay the night, but it's okay. It's not angry at us for being down by the structure. So we're going to stay right here. So we're talking, and then Carlos tells me, he goes, you know, I just put something out there in Mindspeak that I want to see one of them. And he got Mindspeak back, and he goes, I just heard, if you want to see us, come back on down. And Carlos goes, and I told Carlos, I said, that was a challenge. And he goes, yeah. I said, are you going to do it? He goes, no. He goes, I'm not going down there. He goes, but I think I am going to walk down the road in the dark and see if I can communicate with them up here on the road. And I said, okay, you go right on ahead. I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to let you do what you're going to do. I'm going to stay right here. And I sat between the two vehicles in the dark, and it was pitch dark. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And I could hear Carlos pacing back and forth, pace at the back of his Tahoe. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, well, maybe he's kind of decided that he doesn't want to walk all the way down there by himself. And he's just staying away from me to see if anything happens. And I sat there for a good, probably an hour, and I'm going, okay, he's just right over there. He's not coming back. I don't want to talk to him because if I do, it's going to interrupt what he's trying to do. I'm just going to go to bed. So I crawled in my Jeep, and I put the seats down and crawled into my sleeping bag, and I was in the back of my Jeep. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, if anything happens, he'll yell, I'll hear it, you know? And so I'm in there for a while, and probably, I don't know, a couple hours later, I fell asleep. I woke up and I could hear him, and it sounded like he was irritated, like he was just meh, 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 and I'm going, uh-oh. Carlos is irritated. I don't know what he's irritated at, the guy's got a temper. So I just kind of went, well, if he's irritated, I'm going to leave him to it. I'm not going to, just let him be, and I could hear him walking around the backside of my Jeep and mulling around and clanking the chairs and, and I'm going, okay, I don't know what he's upset about, but I'll find out in the morning. I'm not going to get up. So I go back to sleep and I wake up in the morning and I'm hearing his tent zipper off the top of his roof tent. And he's crawling down the ladder off the top of his rig. And I said, okay, well, time to get up. So I crawl out and I said, well, how did it go last night? And he goes, what do you mean? How did it go? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, tell me what happened. Did you, I noticed that you didn't go very far. And he's like, what do you mean I didn't go very far? And I'm like, well, I noticed that you just kind of stayed right there, at the end of your rig. And he goes, no, I would walk down the road like 2 miles. He goes, I was gone for like a couple hours. And I'm like, wait a second. I said, that wasn't you pacing back and forth at the backside of your rig? And he goes, no, that was them. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I said, okay, so what were you angry about? Because I could hear you like mumbling and knocking stuff around. And he goes, it wasn't me. He goes, it was them. He goes, when I got back, I crawled up into my tent and I was listening to them like talking to each other. And they were, he said, they were mulling around and he goes, I was like, should I go down there and see if Angelique's okay? He goes, no. He said, if something happens, she'll scream.
Oh, wow.
So I'm in my rig thinking it's him. And he's up there listening, knowing that it's them. And I, completely oblivious. I'm sitting there literally 10 feet, maybe 14 feet away from them for hours in the pitch dark. Now we got up the next, walked around that day and found that trail, that game trail that they climbed up and down, literally crossed the road right at the backside of his rig and went right up the mountain. And we must have counted probably at that site, probably 3 different individuals. So, and they went to other structures. So we had literally camped on their game trail and they did not like that.
Oh my goodness.
But they were respectful. They could have ruined everything. They could have thrown the chairs. They could have done so much, but they were respectful. They just walked around, talked about us, I'm sure, and probably, cussed us out, for having tried to go down there and stay at their structure. But, that was a huge learning experience for us. And it was something that I learned then, that those structures are sacred and they're not to be messed with. Don't mess with them. If you see one, you can visit it, don't touch it, and don't stay there, because I think they're sacred. They're sacred ground to them. It's like going to a longhouse or a church,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, right. Yep. I next time I find one, I'm not even going to. I know some people that would go inside of them. I wouldn't even do that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, don't go inside. It's okay to be near them. Mm-hmm. Don't go inside because, first of all, you don't know what it's used for. You don't know what it's used for. There's a lot of missing 411, and you don't know if it's. Let's get real. If it could be something like a entrance to something else, or even, something like a portal or something.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah.
It's best to stay out of what you don't know. Visit on the outside, show respect, but don't go in, and don't try to interfere with their life, you know.
Mm. Oh man,
So
what an incredible account. That's going to stick with me for a while. But Angelique, this has been such an interesting conversation. There's been a lot that I think people can learn from this. Thank you for coming on and for sharing what you've experienced over the years and what you've learned.
thank you. Thank
Are
you for
there
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there ways that people can keep up to date with what you're doing, or do you kind of let people know by when you go on a podcast every once in a while? Or
Well, actually, you can contact us, and I please ask that if you do, that you let me know that you saw this podcast, so that I don't think you're a hacker or somebody, because I'm not going to respond, and I'm not going to friend you unless you say, I saw you on Jeremy's program, or Jeremiah's program. I'm sorry.
that's
But
fine.
yeah, so
I'll let it slide. No one else gets to say it though.
please forgive me. Here I am talking about respect. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But yeah, but no, you can reach us on Legacy Discoveries in Search of the Truth. We're on YouTube, and you can see where my son has been documenting day by day his interactions and gifting with a group of adolescents that have come in and gifted him casts, and they've gifted him their footprints, their handprints, flowers, trinkets. Been going on for over a year, almost 2 years. So you can see that day by day documentation on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, on 2 different pages on Facebook, Legacy Discoveries. And then you can reach me, Angelique Benham, on Facebook. Once more, if you do, please tell me you saw me on this channel. And as a note, please don't just contact me because you want to start an argument. If you're friending me to start an argument, I wish you well in life, but
Right. Life's too short to deal with stuff like that.
Life's too short.
Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
I appreciate you so much for having me on here, and I really like what you've got going, and the people that you've had on here are just tremendous, really fantastic people. Thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be here.